right, looks like we're live. I'll get rid of that. There we go. We'll let everybody get in here and queue in for the live Q&A. Let's see, I'll delete that comment. All right, we got one person in. Welcome to live Q&A. All right. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to another live Q&A. This is the bi-weekly live stream series that LiveAquaria likes to host, where we take your questions and we answer them live in the Facebook live stream. So we got a series of questions today, as we always do. And I will be joined by my guest, veterinarian expert, Dr. Nick, who will be joining us here shortly. It's just myself today. Usually I have someone from the Coral Farm like Patrick or Steve, but today it's just me. My name's Ian. And yeah, today we have some questions that we're going to go over today. And yeah, we welcome any questions that may show up in the chat as well. So if you have a question, we'll do our best to answer them as they come in, but we might need to come back to some of the questions as they come in to make sure we're best giving you guys the best answer possible. So Dr. Nick should be joining us here shortly, but in the meantime, let's see here, get some things set up on our end. So in the meantime, I'll go over a few things that we've got going on here at LiveAquaria. We have a Sri Lankan sale going on right now that's up to 40% off. Some really beautiful Sri Lankan aquatic life from Sri Lanka that's available on our website. So head on over to liveaquaria.com and go check out. There's a big banner on the front page, take you to the category with all the available items from that sale. In addition, we have our Black Friday Every Friday campaign that's going on right now, and that's going to be weekly sales every Friday, just on Friday. Get Dr. Nick in here. So 1 second. In addition, we got some new stuff coming up this Friday, as well as we're going to be taking orders from that day and picking 5 winners to receive a $100 gift certificate. So we're announcing Monday, and if you're interested in entering, just get your order in this Friday and you'll be entered for a drawing for one of the 5 $100 gift certificates on Monday.
Hello,
and welcome, Dr. Nick.
Better stand for the phone, but I think this will work now.
No worries. I think we can make this work. Really do greatly appreciate you making the time to join us, as you always do. I know you're really busy, got a busy schedule as we all do, but I think this is always a really fun thing we can do for people to provide some knowledge, some expertise, and so thank you so much. As I mentioned, no Patrick today. It's just Dr. Nick and I. So without further ado, we'll get started. And as I mentioned before, if you got any questions that you have while you're watching the live stream and hearing some of the other questions come in, perhaps you have a question that's related to one of the questions we'll go over from our list today, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll certainly do our best to answer or provide you an answer. But if there's anything that we want to clarify before providing you the right expert information, we'll follow up later in the chat at a later time. So with that being said, I will go ahead and get started with the first question, which is from... Oh, there it is. Sorry. Mark? Yes, Mark. Mark is asking us, I'm restarting a 60-gallon freshwater aquarium. What pack or fish do you recommend? There are currently no fish in the aquarium.
Okay, so it's freshwater, which gives you a lot of different options. A lot depends on what you're looking for. So some people will like a lot of colors. They want some smaller community fish that swim in schools. So that would be good to have, some neon tetras, maybe some different colored platies or mollies. Some zebradanios are good. These are all what are considered community fish and schooling fish, things that like to swim together and also don't eat each other. They're all about the same size and they're very colorful. So that would be the basic, easy to care for community aquarium where you got 5 or 6 different species of fish, and the 60 gallons. So you could put, half a dozen or more of each of those fish in there. for 5 or 6 different species and half a dozen or more of each, which would be a very nice looking, colorful tank, and the fish are swimming around and it looks pretty good. Now, other people might want bigger fish, so showier fish, like for example, discus, angelfish, some of the other cichlids, or even gouramis. Gouramis can get pretty good size, anywhere from 3 inches up to 6 or 8 inches for most gouramis. Some get even larger. But the pearl gourami is, one of the most beautiful colored fish, so that's a really nice, attractive one to have. They're not really schooling fish, but you might keep a pair or maybe 4 of them in a tank, and that would be good. I wouldn't put them with a lot of the cichlids, however. They could go with some angelfish, they could go with some giant danios, some rainbow fish, which would give you bigger fish that have a lot of color. They're less likely to just swim in a school, though. Now, if you want to go with cichlids, there's nothing that's actually more beautiful than a tank of a variety of African cichlids. They come in so many different color varieties, and they're like marine reef fish, that they like to have something that they swim around. So people will usually put a lot of rock work in there, which can make the tank look pretty cool, and then they dart in and out of the rock work. They are somewhat aggressive fish. They're very active. They're very colorful, and a lot of people consider a tank of African cichlids comparable to marine reef fish. However, because they do chase each other a lot, some people don't think they're very relaxing just to sit and watch them. So if they're always darting in and out and chasing one another around, that might not be as relaxing as watching a school of neon tetras swimming around, which are pretty peaceful. But if you're going for the color and bigger fish, then the African cichlids would be a way to go. So those are a couple different options. The one thing I would remind you about is most fish stores will help you differentiate the categories of fish. So you have the community fish, the semi-aggressive fish, and the aggressive fish. So you can't mix an Oscar with neon tetras, right? Because an Oscar would eat everything. Right. So you do want to follow the categorization of making sure that the fish you get are compatible. Most semi-aggressive fish that are of similar size will get along fine. So that would be a lot of the gouramis, a lot of the larger danios, maybe some of the smaller cichlids like ram cichlids, crebensis cichlids that are not as aggressive and territorial. Angelfish would kind of fit in there. If you're looking for a lot of action, South American cichlids are another one to go for. They are pretty aggressive. They do like to tear up the tank, moving things around. But there's a lot of people that'll have maybe 1 or 2 Oscars, which are getting pretty good size, and they're very intelligent. And so Oscars, if you want a pet, Oscars make great pets where you can hand feed them. They, come and talk to you, and you can, really interact with an Oscar cichlid. So that does kind of some ideas to go for. My personal favorite that I've had all different kinds of fish over the year, and right now I have just a general community aquarium. The majority of them are live bearers, so mollies, platies, swordtails, and they're bigger fish, so you get some nice size to them. They're very colorful. You can get them in silver, you get them in black, you get them in red, you get them in green. So a lot of different color varieties. But the nice thing about the live bearers is they reproduce on their own. And so this tank of live bearers I set it up originally in 2009, and I really haven't added new fish to it. They keep, the old ones will eventually die off, but you have the new babies and the tank just keeps going, and you can have a perpetual aquarium of live bearers if you're looking for something like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know some of those different scenarios you brought up. I know I've kept discus and kept cichlids as well, some of the solution live fish. So all those really great options. In addition, I thought it was really handy. I put a link in the chat here too for popular freshwater fish packs at liveaquaria.com. So those are items that we have available on our site right now, and they're all essentially pre-packaged and pre-kitted items, different types of fish that we've already looked at and decided, basically curated the selection for you. So it's a very easy purchasing decision. You can kind of pick from those packs and pick a pack that best suits your
That's a
your
great
desired
idea.
aquarium. So that's great. All right, so on to the next question from Evan. We have a question here from him that says, why does algae grow in a non-cycled tank so fast? We've had some algae questions pretty often. I'm not sure if
this
we've
is a
had
little different question, but it has the same answer. So there's three main nutrients that you use if you're a farmer, if you're a gardener. You're using potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen. And when we first set up an aquarium, we get large amounts of ammonia, and ammonia is a nitrogen source. That ammonia goes converted to nitrite and then to nitrate, all of which essentially act as fertilizer for plants. So when you first set up an aquarium, you're going to see a spike in nitrogen, and that's going to be what's fertilizing your algae and making the algae grow. Now, you can do water changes to keep that ammonia, nitrite, nitrate levels lower. That can slow down your biofiltration process because you need that bacteria to grow that does the biofiltration, and they grow on the ammonia, converting it to nitrite, and then nitrite converted to nitrate. So until you see your nitrate levels going up, you might not want to do a lot of water changes, especially if you don't have fish in the tank. You can add ammonia, like a powdered ammonium chloride, into the water to get the nitrogen cycle going, get the bacteria growing, and you can add bacteria starters to increase the rate that the bacteria grow. And then once you get that nitrate starting to form, your biofilter bacteria are present, then you can start doing those water changes and eliminating the algae. If you have, especially if you don't have fish in the tank when you're first starting it, just getting your biofilter going, you can also add some of the medications that are available over the counter for reducing algae growth. And those will help kill the algae without hurting the biofilter. Now, one of the problems that people will sometimes have if you have a lot of algae in your tank and you add algae remover, which essentially kills the algae, is that dead algae contributes to ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate, and you can cause an ammonia spike, which can harm the fish. So you have to be very cautious when you're using algae treatment with fish in the tank. You need to monitor your ammonia levels. But if you're setting up a brand new tank, you can get all of this done before you add the fish. And then once your nitrate level starts going up, you know that it's ready to start adding fish, and you can do water changes at that point.
Awesome. Yeah, very common algae. I mean, it seems like that's always something people are interested in. So it's almost like we don't have a normal live Q&A unless we have an algae question. So
yeah, if you go back to any week in the past, there are definitely algae questions every week. So that just shows how big of a problem this is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like there's a lot. I mean, certainly LiveAquaria is not the only people that or only source of information that's ever talked about this. This has been a long-standing topic of discussion for aquarium keeping for tale as old as time. So yeah, it just goes to show you that there's always people entering. I guess the way I look at it, there's always people entering the hobby, and they're not quite at that point in their hobby journey where they've sort of clicked that part together, and that they've got that maybe sort of mastered, or that's sort of like locked into their brain. So it's definitely a different journey for everybody. This next question comes from Kyle in the chat. So thank you, Kyle, for putting in the chat. He's looking for us to talk, and we'll do the best we can here. We'll definitely provide some information in the chat if we need to at a later date. But he's wondering if we could talk about the sources and definition of captive bred fish on the site. He sees the banner on some fish, but on others, which are clearly not wild caught, fancy goldfish, live bears, bettas, etc. So I guess I know I can speak certainly a little bit to sort of the sourcing end, because I'm involved with that quite a bit on the day-to-day day-to-day working with some other folks here on LiveAquaria and in Wisconsin. Obviously, we're sourcing wild caught fish as well as captive bred items. So we obviously work with reputable suppliers wherever we can, however we can, to find the aquatic life items, either captive bred or wild caught, that people like yourselves are looking for. And that we do our best to make sure that when we put an item on the site, the captive bred, that we market as such, just to make sure that as a consumer you're making a informed purchasing decision that this item is captive bred. Obviously, some people are looking for captive bred where some others aren't. And I mean, really, that kind of just goes for marine fish and freshwater fish too. It's kind of the same for both types of fish. And yeah, I mean, we do our best to work with all sorts of suppliers, and always finding new suppliers that we can bring on board who meet the LiveAquaria standards. Dr. Nick, I don't know if you have anything.
That's a great question, because you don't know in a lot of cases. And there are some fish that are still collected in the wild exclusively. There's also some fish that can still be collected in the wild, but also are being farmed. And so you could have both in an aquarium store at the same time or at different times of the year, which is often the case depending on supply. I would recommend anyone interested goes to the website for Project Piaba. It's P-I-A-B-A, Project Piaba. I don't know if it's projectpiaba.org, but if you just Google it, you'll find it. Piaba is the name in Portuguese for little aquarium fish, and piaberos are the people who collect them. These fish are collected by hand in the Amazon, and they're maintained very carefully, and the piaberos are still very active collecting fish in a very sustainable way. And I can definitely guarantee that the fish that are collected by the piaberos in Brazil and on the Amazon are done in a sustainable, healthy fashion. I've actually been there watching the collection process, and it's really good. So I highly support the Project Piaba, which is to keep this industry alive, which is supporting a lot of the people who live in these certain areas of South America, that their livelihood is catching aquarium fish. Okay, so if the fish are coming through Project Piaba, I can tell you that they're very sustainably harvested. Now that's only in Brazil and some other parts of South America. There's other places in Africa, India, Asia where fish are collected, and hopefully that's being done sustainably and not reducing the wild population. That also brings up the same question for marine fish. So right now, about 90 to 95% of freshwater fish are farmed, and only a small percentage, 5% or a little bit more, are still wild collected. With marine fish, it's probably 20% farmed and 80% wild collected. And so you are getting issues with fish that are being taken out of the wild. Now, again, if it's done sustainably with hand nets, and I don't know that anybody's using cyanide during collection anymore. That unfortunately was a problem in the 70s, maybe early 80s, but that's pretty much done with now. Thank goodness. But there's still a lot of marine fish that are collected. However, there are more and more companies that are getting involved with breeding marine aquarium fish. And there's several hundred species of marine aquarium fish that are being bred now. Another good resource to look into is the reef. What is it? I got mixed up with the Project Piaba. It is the Rising Tides. Rising Tides program
Rising Tide, yeah.
is a industry-funded program to help increase the production of captive-bred marine fish. And so if you're looking for marine fish that are being sustainably bred in Hawaii and Florida and other places around the U.S., the Rising Tide Project is where you want to go and look for that. And you could ask your local retailer, and I think we probably at the LiveAquaria get some the captive bred marine fish from the companies that are involved in the Rising Tide Project. So that's a good way to get more information on which fish are being sustainably bred rather than collected in the wild. And over the next, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years in the aquarium fish industry, we're going to see more and more marine fish being bred because we're learning how to do it better. It's pretty easy now to breed almost all freshwater fish. With marine fish, because they're totally different styles of breeding, they have the pelagic spawners where everything's just floating around, and the problem is getting the right food source for those baby fish. And we're figuring out how to raise algae, how to raise plankton and rotifers to raise the baby fish. So the breeding part is okay, but then the babies don't survive well without that food. So now that we figured out how to feed the babies, we're getting much better success. So that's the up and coming thing, and you'll see a lot more marine fish are going to be captive bred. So eventually you'll see, right now you might see some fish labeled as captive bred, but in the future you'll pretty much suspect that the majority of the marine fish, as our freshwater fish, will be captive bred.
Yeah, that's. Thank you so much for that explanation. I think you really touched on a lot of good things there. And I agree. Captive bred, more sustainability is the future of this hobby, and obviously LiveAquaria stands with that. Kyle added on, given the growing support for Project Piaba, it would be great to see badging on fish from LiveAquaria that were sourced there, and it would be great to support an organization that's collecting ethically. Yeah, so that's a great suggestion, Kyle. I'm going to take that away to our sourcing and the rest of the team here, and we'll see. Incorporate that into our presentation too, so you as a consumer more informed with your purchasing decision, feel, I guess, better about purchasing overall from LiveAquaria too. I mean, like as I mentioned before, we're always doing working with sustainable and ethical partners in the source and collection, and is always at the forefront of the LiveAquaria brand. It's something we've always prided ourselves in. It's something we still do today. So this is just another great suggestion we can look at. So thank you for that. And thank you for your questions. Next question comes from Aiden. Aiden asked, what should I do about blackbeard algae, or BBA, growing on my jungle Vallisneria at the surface of my...
Okay. So yeah, it seems like the blackbeard algae loves to grow on aquarium plants, which, like, if it was growing on a rock, you could take the rock out, scrub it. You could even soak it in a bleach solution and then put it in a solution with sodium thiosulfate to remove the chlorine, clean it all up, put it back in your tank, done. But it's growing on your plants, which it just seems very common to get the blackbeard algae growing on your plants.
And the Vallisneria, the Vallisneria is not exactly a particular, not that it's easy to clean it off to begin with, the Vallisneria too is not exactly, would be even difficult to maintain.
Yeah, so it's hard to clean, and it doesn't rub off very easily. I've tried, I have some anubias with the blackbeard algae growing on it, and it's like you can't rub it off. It doesn't rub off. So what I do on that one is, if I see one of the leaves that gets pretty heavy, I'll cut that leaf off and just throw it away, because I don't want to increase the blackbeard algae in the tank. And hopefully the new leaves are growing faster than the old leaves are being removed to keep going. So you could, if you have some of your Vallisneria, they're long, skinny ones coming up. If you have some that you could, trim off the worst of them and keep the better ones, that might help. But this goes back to all of the algae questions we've talked about before. High ammonia, high nitrite, high nitrate, and high phosphate. Those are the things that make the algae grow. So you want to measure the phosphate, which is not something that people normally test for. Measure it in your tap water to see if the phosphate is coming in with your tap water, which a lot of cities add phosphate to the tap water if you have lead pipes, because it keeps the lead from leaching out into the water. So it's good for the people, it's not good for your aquarium. And if you do find you have, high nitrogen products or high phosphate, there are filter media that you can put into your either canister filter or a hang on the back filter that will absorb those, and then you take that out and throw it away and replace it every month. That will help. There's chemicals you can add that help bind and neutralize those. If your tap water doesn't have phosphate, then using water changes to help remove phosphate from the water will help. If your tap water has phosphate, then you may need to use RO water. But you can't use pure RO water, so you have to buffer it with some other type of water that has the minerals in it, so your pH and your hardness aren't too low, and your alkalinity is not too low. So that's, I don't want to get too much in water chemistry here, but algae is related to water chemistry and light. So maybe turn your lights off a little bit, not as long, to reduce the light that's making the algae grow as well. And one last thing is I've seen, I can't tell you the name right off the top of my head, but I have seen algae control products that are specifically labeled for blackbeard algae. So you might do a Google search for that and see.
Yeah, probably have run into that a time or two, but I can't think. That's interesting. Cool. All right, I think we've got time for one more question here. This came from, sorry, I lost track. This was an interesting one, and I don't think we've gotten this one before, but it's along the line of plants. It's a good segue into this next question from Hope. Hope was wondering, what are some plants that you should never put into?
Okay, so if you're talking about a real aquarium, freshwater aquarium, where the water's all the way to the top and all the plants are underwater, so submerged, there are some plants that are sold at fish stores that will not survive in that environment. And they used to just sell them, and you'd buy them and you'd put them in your tank, and they live for a month, and then they fall apart and die, and you don't really think much about it, and just go buy more. But now most places will label them either as emergent, meaning they're growing out of the water, or they'll label them as bog plants or terrarium plants. And if you have a terrarium, maybe with an aquatic portion, some of these plants would be great for that, where they grow in the water but come out of the water and aren't totally submerged. But if you put them 100% submerged for a long period of time, they will die. One of the most common ones that you'll see are the Dracaena. So you'll see it as the yellow ribbon or the gold ribbon plants, and these are ones that have a central stem that comes off with little leaves that go in all different directions. They can be solid green, or they can have gold stripes or white stripes on them, and they're really pretty. And if you plant them underwater, you make this kind of cool looking forest, but they will die if they're totally submerged. And there's lots of different Dracaena marginatus, and a lot of other ones. Those are made to be either in this root in the water, but the leaves coming up. So those would be great for a paludarium, where you have water and land areas connected. So if you have amphibians that go in and out of the water, you can plant those. Some of the other ones that you'll often see is mondo grass. And this looks just like little leaves of grass. They usually come in a bunch with tiny leaves, and they're pretty short. And they look great in aquariums because they stay short, but they eventually die because they're not fully aquatic. What's funny is if you go to your landscaper, you'll see mondo grass for sale to put into your yard because it can live totally out of the water, but it does not survive totally submerged. But if you have it in a wet environment, like a bog environment, where you have maybe gravel that water runs through into a deeper area, those would be fine. So mondo grass. The other one that's similar to that is a chorus, which looks very grass-like, and it's not meant to be totally submerged. Let's see, the other ones, some of the fern-looking ones. So what is it called? Jungle fern or Java fern. Some of these they look like ferns because they are ferns, but they're not totally submersible. So if you put them in the aquarium and they're totally underwater, they will eventually just rot and die. So we can put a list of some of these non-aquatic plants on our comment section here. So when you go to the fish store, if you double check and make sure it's not one of these species, it'll probably be okay. But I made a list of the most common plants you'll see sold at fish stores that are really not true aquatic plants. Now, some true aquatic plants can grow 100% submerged, or they can grow in, in like a bog environment where they're not totally submerged. So those would be great ones to have if you have a tank that has different levels of water in it, that they can grow out of the water or in the water. But for an aquarium, you don't want to get the ones that need to be emergent and have the part of the plant coming up above the water, because they will die maybe in a month, maybe 2 months, you know, not necessarily in a week, but they'll die if they're totally submerged.
Awesome. Well, I did put that list in the chat, and I think we'll definitely look at adding that to, you know, like the other channels we'll do is usually take this video content, we'll put it on YouTube so other people can find it and enjoy it, and hopefully find some helpful information, tips, tricks, solutions to their problems on other channels. So definitely go check that out. You can use, you know, YouTube as our YouTube channel also is sort of an archive for these things too, as well as our Facebook page. So go check that out there if you prefer it on YouTube. It is also there, and we actually will have it by chapter also. So our YouTube channel, when we load it through our YouTube channel, we'll actually update that so you can kind of go question by question in the time. Maybe hone in on the question you might be after. So yeah, that's awesome. And then like Dr. Nick, I think we've been talking about putting this on our site. So we're definitely gonna be working on a plan to get all these questions that we gathered for you and provide answers for. Basically just been like creating a giant spreadsheet of different questions and answers. And our plan is to build this into the site so you guys have sort of a nice FAQ section that you can look at and find your answers there too, as another source of information from us. So I think that pretty much covers this live Q&A. I want to thank Dr. Nick for taking time to answer these questions. I want to thank everybody who submitted their questions. If you haven't already done that, go over to LiveAquaria.com on the homepage. You scroll down a little bit. There's a banner to submit your question, and then we'll be adding that to our list. Other than I think that pretty much covers it. We won't have a live Q&A next week. The next one will be the week after Thanksgiving. Yeah, yes, correct. That's next week's Thanksgiving.
Next week's Thanksgiving.
It's kind of crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Did I get it right? I feel like my days are screwed up here. But yes, we will have our next live Q&A from now. So definitely stay tuned for that. We will be taking more questions and answering them live here on Facebook. So yeah, without further ado, thank you, Dr. Nick, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week.
See you in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving.